So I'm back. Our dough has been resting for about a half an hour. Remember, that's going to allow it to rest and relax the glutens a little bit, so it'll a little bit easier of a process going through our pasta machine. This was made from all-purpose flour, like I said earlier. This is semolina flour, so this is that coarse durum wheat that I was talking about. You can either make pasta with this, or you can use it to dust the surface, so when our pasta comes through the roller and we have sheets, it's not going to stick. I like to dust my parchment lined sheet pan with a little semolina, have it waiting. Gonna grab a little extra flour because I can tell the pasta dough looks a little too wet. You want it to be tacky, but you don't want it to be so tacky that it's gonna stick in your pasta machine. Every dough will be different. You just kind of have to eyeball it and see what's going on. So I'm going to give my surface some flour. I'm going to press a little flour into the dough at this point, just to dry things up a bit so we can easily start rolling it or thinning it through our pasta machine. So this was this recipe using, remember I said 2 cups of flour and 4 eggs. I'm going to cut this in half or maybe even into thirds, and we're going to make this a little easier in the pasta machine. Let's cut it in half. This can wait, and we'll roll this out in a bit. And let's talk about this pasta machine that I have in front of me. So this is a large-scale restaurant version of what many of you have at home or what many of you have seen. This is an Atlas brand. It's very common, easy to find, and not that expensive. I would say grab one. If you ever see one on sale, pick it up. Don't be intimidated. This will work just like this. What I'm going to do first is make sure that I'm on the widest setting. So I want the wheels of my pasta machine, I want them spread apart as far as they possibly can go to start the process. So this happens to be a number 10 on my dial. Depending on the dial you have and the number you have, just look at the wheels, the rollers, and spread them apart as much as you can. So I'm going to start by cranking this through. Hopefully we won't have too much stick. And I'm going to letter fold this in thirds. So just like you'd fold a letter, once over, so that's thirds, and then it's going to go back through the machine, still on that widest setting. And I want to do that again, and now I'm going to fold it the other way into thirds, one time, back through my machine. I'm going to do this 5 times, and then I'm going to start thinning my dough. Again, thirds. So what this is doing is when you're kneading bread by hand or kneading dough by hand, you're developing that gluten that I was talking about. This is doing that job for us right now, and it's just stretching it between the wheels is actually developing the gluten in this case. I think this was number maybe 4. Like I said, we're going to do this 5 times, and then I'm going to start thinning my dough. Last, another letter fold back through. They even make KitchenAid attachments to do this. So if you have a KitchenAid stand mixer, you can get an attachment, and a pasta machine goes right on the nose, and it does all the cranking for you. So at this point in time, I want to make sure I'm not going to have any stick, dusting with a little flour, and I'm going to reduce the setting by a notch. I'm going to go down to number 9. The wheels are coming a little closer together, so it's going to start thinning the dough for me at this point. I want to make big long sheets, or what in Italy they call sfoglia. I want to do that because I want to make some ravioli. So again, back through, getting a little thinner each time. But it's really important to take your time with this and don't just jump down a bunch of settings at one time. Go number by number, get those wheels closer and closer together, and be patient and slowly thin your sheet of pasta. So now I'm down just under number 5. Looking nice. Down another number. If you notice you're starting to stick in your machine, just add a little extra flour. So I have plenty of flour on my work surface to prevent that sticking. Down on a number 3 now. This is going to be a nice length. Remember, this was half of that mass of dough. This is going to be a really nice length to make a good amount of ravioli with. Maybe we can get 6 or 8 ravioli out of 2 sheets. If it gets too long, you don't have an assistant, cut your dough in half and make your life a little easier. You don't want to be working with a piece of dough that's this long with only 2 hands. It gets pretty challenging. This is really one of my favorite things to do in the cooler months when I want to spend a little more time inside in my kitchen. I make a lot of pasta at home. You can freeze your sheets of pasta very nicely, just in sheets of fresh pasta. So you'll always have sheets of pasta in your fridge for whatever you want to do with it later on. Maybe you'll pull it out, let it thaw out in the refrigerator, and then maybe you'll decide later you want to cut it into spaghetti or cut it into linguine, or maybe you want to make a batch of ravioli with it. Keep it in sheets, and then you have all the possibilities later on. So I'm almost down to number 1, and that's where I'm going to stop for my sheet of ravioli. It's as thin as we're going to go. Because remember, it's ravioli. We need some strength to hold that filling in place when it is actually going to be poached or cooked. Oh, this is beautiful. So we don't have anything breaking. It's nice and thin. I'm going to now transfer this to my sheet where I have that light dusting of semolina. And you can always, if you have enough flour, certainly turn it onto itself, but make sure you are flouring so you're going to prevent any sticking later on. That's always frustrating. So again, I'm going to do the exact same thing with my other half of the dough. Open up those rollers as far as they'll go, back to number 10. So remember, it's 5 times through initially on that same setting. Letter folded in thirds, back through, 5 times. This is number 3. This is number 4. This is so fun. Oh, unless your pasta machine starts to move around like that. So in this stage of the game, remember, we're reducing the number, or we're making the space smaller each time we pass through. And this is thinning our pasta. Down on number 6. Whatever number you decide to stop on my first sheet, I decided it was number 1. I want to make sure I'm going to stop this sheet on number 1. So we have even pasta to sandwich our ravioli filling. And that'll make sense in just a moment. Down to 4. This is where you can get a number of people involved in the kitchen. Get a few hands involved in this. Make a bunch of pasta on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon. And then, like I said, freeze it, dry it. It's really simple to dry pasta. Typically, that's going to be more of a semolina, eggless pasta that you're going to make to dry. And you hang it up. You could use a clothes dryer, a little wooden clothes drying rack to hang up your pasta and allow it to dry for storage. Almost there. Jumping down to 1 at this point. Remember, if it gets unruly, unmanageable, cut your pasta in half. I don't want to tear the sheets. I don't want to stretch the sheets too much as they're coming out of the pasta machine. So if it's too much to handle, just cut it in half. Here's my second sheet of pasta, just like the first, waiting for ravioli filling. At this stage, you could easily cut the pasta into long strands, however long you want them to be, down into linguine, fettuccine, do something really thin like angel hair. And these all come with a cutter attachment. So you put on a cutter, you pass the dough through one time, it cuts the pasta for you, so you don't have to use a knife. All right, we're ready to make some ravioli. Just gonna clear the surface of all that extra flour. I wanna leave a little down. I'm going to put a base sheet of my pasta down on the table. Give yourself a lot of workspace. And I'm going to even this out, making it as even as I can. So what I have is a nice long rectangle. Brushing off the excess flour. I want a little flour on the underside. I don't need flour on the inside. I'm going to have my other sheet waiting, and that's going to be the top. What I've made here, just did this a few minutes ago. I had a lot of zucchini squash, as I'm sure many of you still do, in your garden. All I did was took one zucchini squash, a really nice small dice. I sauteed it with a little bit of onion, a little garlic, and then I had a handful of leftover Hazeldell mushrooms, a nice mushroom mixture. So I just threw that in as well. Sweated that all together, got it all nice and soft, gave it some salt and pepper, and what you want to make sure with your ravioli filling, whatever it happens to be, it's not too wet. So if you're going to put vegetables into your ravioli, make sure you cook the vegetables ahead of time, season them, make them taste wonderful, and then allow them to drain. Put them in a colander, put them on a clean towel, just get that excess water out of them, and then they're not going to produce too much water inside your ravioli. So once I had those vegetables cooked, the zucchini, the mushrooms, the onion, the garlic, I added a little bit of goat cheese and a little bit of Parmesan cheese. Last but not least, don't forget fresh herbs. I put in a handful of fresh thyme and some basil. It should be a really nice filling. Taste it. Make sure it's perfect before you start making your ravioli. It's frustrating if you try your ravioli and the filling's a little bland or a little too salty because you didn't taste it ahead of time. This is simply a broken egg and some water. It's an egg wash, sometimes called anglaise. This egg wash is going to act as our glue to hold those two sheets of pasta together. So what I do is I'm brushing down the long sides of my sheet. That egg wash is just going to wait for me there. And then I'm going to make these about maybe a tablespoon size. Oh, I forgot one thing. I put some pine nuts in this filling. I had some toasted pine nuts in the pantry. Why not throw them into your filling? Make a nice addition to some ravioli. I think I'm going to get about 5 ravioli. I could squeeze it together, and let's try to get 6. Make your ravioli as large or as small as you'd like. Sometimes people like to only serve one big ravioli and a little bit of sauce or a little bit of broth. Just make yourself larger size raviolis. If you want to serve each guest or yourself 6 ravioli, make them small. It's totally up to you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want to get 6. It's about a tablespoon. At this point in time, before I put my top sheet of pasta over top, I want to make sure I am giving myself that egg wash right down in between each. This is going to be my seal to hold those 2 sheets of pasta together. I have egg wash surrounding each mound of ravioli filling. Next is my second sheet of pasta. I'm just going to start at the one end and drape it. Maybe I'll have a little extra on this sheet, which is fine. It's not quite as wide as the base. And then I'm just going to trim off any excess on the end there. I'll save that and freeze it. Like I said, it's really nice to have some frozen sheets of pasta to work with. At this point, I want to make sure I'm getting the air, any air pockets out of there. So I'm just going right up against the filling and pushing the air away, so I don't have one big pocket of air. So I'm going to push the air before I actually seal it. I like to use my hands for this. You can really use whatever tool you find works the best. Remember, if you wanted to cook these off right away, have your salted boiling water waiting. You could test one as soon as you cut your first ravioli. You can give it a test right into the water. The first thing I'm going to do is trim off this excess. I like to use a pizza wheel. I think it's handy to cut pasta with. Got a little too much on this one end. This sheet is definitely worth saving, wrapping it tightly, putting it in your freezer, using it later, just cut it down into pasta. Now you have an option of shaping your ravioli. Our filling is sandwiched between two sheets. You can either just cut out squares, and I would just use my pizza wheel and cut out squares. You can use a fancier cutter and this will give you that traditional ravioli edge. Don't necessarily need to go out and buy one of these. Just use a knife or use a pizza wheel. Or you could use any type of mold. Whatever will fit this. This actually looks like a nice size to just make a nice round ravioli right around that amount of filling. So all I'm going to do is use this mold and push straight through. And you magically have this really beautiful round ravioli. You want to make sure at this stage that it is completely sealed together, and these look really nice. You could take a fork and crimp the edges if you like. I actually like them to look just like that, so I keep them nice and simple and just make nice little even rounds with it. These freeze beautifully in this state. You could cut out your ravioli, make sure it's sealed together, freeze them individually like this first on a sheet pan. Once they're all totally frozen, pull them out, throw them in a Ziploc bag, and then just pull out a handful of ravioli whenever you literally want a 5-minute dinner. For a ravioli like this, it has a pretty nice complex filling with the mushrooms, with the zucchini, pine nuts. I would do a really quick brown butter sauce and be 100% satisfied. So all that is taking whole butter, cooking it to the point of browning those solids in the butter, and you have brown butter. Do a little spoonful of brown butter over top of my ravioli. Perfect dinner. Handful of fresh herbs on the top from your garden. Lovely. Here you have it. Simple as that. Got some nice ravioli and then an extra little sheet to do whatever you'd like in the future.